Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar, Perfecting Your Logo. This is part 1 of 2 on marking logos with a laser marking machine. Today, we'll be discussing how to prep raster files, and in our next webinar, we'll discuss vector files. That webinar will be held on July 19th, so be sure to catch that webinar as well. My name is Tim Cerniglia, and I am the Southwest Regional Manager for SCHMIDT. With me today is Kyle Williams from our tech support team. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat box on the right side of your screen and Kyle will respond. As time permits, he'll also answer some of your submitted questions on air at the end of the webinar. So to begin, what are raster files? Raster files are images made up of tiny squares that contain color information. These are called dots or pixels. The number of dots in each image make up its resolution, which is measured by dots per inch or DPI. So a 1-inch square with a resolution of 72 DPI has 5,184 dots of color information. The higher the resolution, the more detail an image will have. This is especially important when working with big images. We'll see why in a little bit. The file types listed here are some of the most commonly used types of raster files. Vector files are not based on pixels or dots. Instead, it uses math to draw shapes. Lines are created using anchor points and vector curves between them. So whereas a raster image of a 1-inch by 1-inch square at 72 DPI will have over 5,000 individual points of information, a vector image will only contain 4 points, 1 for each corner. The computer will use math to connect the dots. The file types here are some of the most common types of vector files. So here's our logo. On the left is a raster image, a JPEG, set at 72 DPI. On the right is the same logo, but saved as an EPS vector file. They're pretty much identical. Once we enlarge the images, you can see how they differ. The raster image contains the same amount of pixels as before. However, because those pixels now need to make a bigger image, they're stretched out, causing fuzziness and jagged lines. This is what it means for an image to look pixelated. On the other hand, the image quality of the vector file has remained the same. When scaling, the vector image program recalculates the lines to be drawn between points, preserving the image quality and avoiding distortion. Now that we know a little more about raster and vector files, let's talk about marking. Again, today we'll just be focusing on raster files. Before you upload your logo to your laser software, you need to prepare the image. You can use professional photo editing software such as Adobe Photoshop, but using something as simple as Microsoft Paint is fine too. Firstly, make sure that your logo or image is using an appropriate size and resolution for your mark. What's appropriate will depend on what your logo looks like and how big of a mark you're making. Generally, we recommend using as high of a resolution as you can, and an image that is bigger than the mark you'll be making. Secondly, make sure the image is black and white only, and that there are no shades of either color. Perhaps the easiest way to do this is to open the image in Microsoft Paint and save it as a monochrome bitmap. This file type takes colors and shades that are closest to white and converts them to white. Colors and shades closest to black will be converted to black. Lastly, make sure your image is clean, that there aren't any unwanted marks, shapes, shades, or shadows in the image. Let's take a closer look at how you will do all these steps in Microsoft Paint. So here's Microsoft Paint. Let's open our SCHMIDT logo. We can already tell that the logo is big, but let's check the size. From this View tab, I can click on Rulers to get rulers across the top and left side of the screen. The measurements are in pixels, but seeing the size in inches would be more helpful. To do that, I'll click on File, then Properties. Here, we get some helpful information. Near the top, we can see that resolution of the image is 120 dpi. That's pretty good. We definitely don't want to go much lower than that. In the section labeled Units, we can switch from pixels to inches or centimeters. We'll choose inches, and when we click OK, the rulers at the top and left of the screen are converted to inches. This image is roughly 17 by 4.5 inches big with a resolution of 120 dpi. We're going to put this mark on an aluminum card that's 3.5 by 2 inches. So the size and resolution in this scenario should be fine. Now, let's convert this to black and white. To do that, I'm going to click on File, Save As, and in the Save As Type drop-down box, I'll select Monochrome Bitmap. Then, I'll click Save. We'll get a warning that the color quality is going to be reduced, and that's fine. So we'll click OK. The program recognized the blue as a color close to black, so now the logo is black. Lastly, let's clean this up. I don't want this rectangle around our logo, so we'll get rid of that. There are multiple ways to do this. We can use the pencil tool to color it the same color as the background, but that's not very efficient. You can do something similar with the eraser. By using the selection tool, we can make a box over parts of the rectangle and then hit Delete on the keyboard to remove everything within the box. But in this case, the easiest and fastest thing to do is to use the Paint Bucket tool. This will change the color of the entire shape when we click on it. The image is now prepped. Let's save the image and get ready to mark. For today's demo, we'll be using our GeoMark Pro, a Class 1 laser system that comes standard with a 20-watt laser, powered door, and powered Z-axis. So here's our laser software, SCHMIDT. It's important to note that if you're using different software, you likely won't have the same exact settings that we have here, but you should have settings that function similarly. We're going to upload the image, and to do that, we're going to click on Import in the File menu, then navigate to the folder where the file is saved. In our software, we have this Bitmap tab that has settings specifically for bitmaps and other images. We set our image resolution in the dither step area of the Bitmap tab. After some testing, we've determined that setting the millimeters per pixel to 0.05 will get us a high quality mark for this logo. Ultimately, you'll want to test different settings to see what works best for you. As you test, remember that generally, the lower the millimeters per pixel, the higher the resolution, but the longer it will take to complete the mark. On the other hand, the higher the millimeters per pixel, the lower the resolution, but the shorter it will take to complete the mark. Now that's all set. We'll click Apply and then start the mark. Here's a picture of the mark, and it looks how we expected it. Clean with crisp edges, just like the high-res image. Let's see what happens when we make a mark with a low-res image. The image on the left is the high-res logo, and the image on the right is the low-res logo. At first glance, it doesn't look so bad, though the edges along the S and M do look fuzzier on the low-res image. But if we zoom in, the difference is much more noticeable. As I mentioned previously, the dither step setting will also affect the resolution of the mark. We had it set at 0.05 millimeters per pixel. Let's set it at 0.2 millimeters per pixel on the high-res logo and see the difference that it makes. While we're showing you that mark, we'll return to the mark of the high-res logo set at 0.05 millimeters per pixel, just to compare the cycle times. The high-res logo with the DPI set at 0.05 millimeters per pixel is all the way on the left. In the middle is the low-res image with the same DPI. And all the way on the right is the high-res image set at 0.2 millimeters per pixel. The mark is probably just as bad, if not worse, than the mark with the low-res image. The most important takeaway is this. If you want the highest quality logo possible, use a high resolution for both the image you upload and the mark itself. And that's all there is to laser marking raster images. If you would like more information on this topic or marking in general, you can visit us on the web at www.gtschmidt.com. You can surf the site for information and videos about laser marking and other types of marking as well. The news section in particular is a great resource on the site for marking information. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter for tips and updates. And don't forget to join us next month on July 19th for part 2 of our Perfecting Your Logo webinar. We'll talk more about how vector files work and how to prep them for laser marking. Again, this is Tim Cerniglia. And from all of us here at SCHMIDT, we thank you for coming and hoping you have a great weekend.